Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Pinball Arcade. So I did decide to go and launch Pinball Arcade in DirectX 9 mode and then play a couple of games of Paragon that we played last time. There is definitely a difference in the visual quality in DirectX 9 mode. A lot of dark images that seem to just be a darker shade of the color for the art, for instance, on the table, whereas in the DirectX 11 mode, it is much more a feeling of there are images and they might be in shadow, so they look darker. But if the silver pinball were to take some of the lighting from like a LED in a bumper or someplace and reflect that downward to the table, it feels like it would actually light up that area much more naturally. As far as for my computer playing with the DirectX 9 versus the DirectX 11 version, doesn't change the way it feels. It feels fine either way. So I think there's no problem there for powerhouse computers. But I could imagine a lot of people playing on older laptops and then needing to drop down to DirectX 9. The DirectX 9 does have one significant difference in that there are more pictures on the wall that are just completely missing in the DirectX 11 version. But the online play is still in beta. Um, there's no tournament mode. The settings are half shared and half not shared. Um, so, like, it's weird, certainly jumping between the two of them. Today we're into the 80s, so we're playing the Black Knight, which is one of the best tables out there. Now, there is another table called Heavy Metal, and so there might be some misremembering for people between the two tables because they both seem very similar but are actually very different tables. Um, so yeah, there's there's some difference here. I would say the Black Knight is also kind of a weird table because it has a upper elevated play field that makes a lot of your shots um, fairly difficult, frankly, because you have to get up these ramps or it's going to just shoot back down the ramp um, and probably drain out the center. Uh, Black Knight came out in 1990. It was designed by Steve Ritchie, who also lists his talents as the voice of the Black Knight. This is another voice game, although there is much more, I suppose, solid state memory that was used for the sound effects in Black Knight over the 3 years of development. I mean, it really was a time of uh, electronic boom, as it were. Plus, also, you have to remember that pinball tables could easily be the equivalent of $4,000 or $5,000 machines. So putting in a massive amount of brand new technology into a pinball table does make a lot more sense than, say, putting in the same amount of technology into a single cartridge that would go into like an NES. 83 is when the Nintendo Entertainment System came out, and I don't believe there's a single NES game that ever came out that could speak or play any kind of sound effect that even sounded slightly like speaking and wouldn't have just come out as kind of beeps. This table was the first ever to introduce a split level playfield. I'm glad they didn't embrace that a lot because it creates a different experience for sure. With 3 ramps leading to and from the upper playfield, this classic also featured the first ever Magna save, a magnet that allowed users to press a button which saves the ball from draining in the outlane. Another first was the bonus ball in a multiplayer game. This feature awards the player with the highest score a few additional seconds of free play. 1,375 tables were produced. What's also interesting here is that we didn't get a number for how many units were produced for Paragon, where they've been fairly consistent with reporting that information for everything else, as if that would have been a corporate secret or something for a game in the 80s. See, we also have an operator's manual here, although in this case, I don't know if I would really use it. So yeah, like the DirectX 9 mode of a game had a lot of images like this where it just seemed like it was dark red on the art, but you can even see here that there is kind of a haze of light around each LED. So here's a MagnaSave, and here's a MagnaSave. Now I'll have to figure out if the MagnaSave works. So yeah, you can hear that's a few more words. We'll have to figure out if MagnaSave is triggered with the left and right flippers or with they're triggered on the controller with the left and right bumpers. Also, we're up to a 7-digit score now instead of 6 digits. So there's a ramp up here, which is your best right shot. And it takes a lot of the left table, frankly, and a lot of power to get up here to get it to this. And then you shoot it up to the left or right to hit these drop down targets, which that is kind of your main goal. Or you shoot it down this ramp and all the way to lock multi-ball, which they didn't even mention. Suppose you can also shoot it up here. I don't even know what that does. I don't remember that one. So you have offset left and right flippers designed a little awkwardly. You would think that that flipper would meet to the edge of the other one, but it doesn't. Down on the lower playfields, there's not a lot to hit. There's 3 drop down targets here, 3 drop down targets here, and then a multi-ball, I think, lower playfield multi-ball launcher or starter going through that hole. And then there's basically, I think, just a target back in that area. It is a unique design to say the least, but it is also a design that doesn't do much of anything in the lower playfield. Very nice sword theme with the lights. Lots of lights. This shot, this middle ramp, I suppose is what you best describe it as, is practically impossible to shoot up. It's very steep, where this one on the right is less steep and would shoot the ball kind of in a more generic area. You just have a silverish black knight. This is a Williams table. We're seeing kind of a running theme that the ones that have the scantily clad girls are the bad tables, and in a funny way we get the opposite scenario where the tables that are really, really beloved seem to not go that wild with the art. Although Gorgar is kind of an exception to that. This is interesting. It has a high score that just lights up in the background that doesn't have a cutout, which I wonder if it actually costs more money to have a cutout versus something else. You also have a screen down here that says game over, ball and play, match, shoot again, and tilt. So not quite to the point where they want to put a full LCD display to spell out words, instead just using lights, which I imagine were considerably cheaper, but you have to have LCDs to display a number set. It would just not be worth it. LCDs these days are usually controllable by a chip and a lookup table as far as what lights should be on when it gets a signal for the number 1 or 2 or 0. All of that is kind of built into the unit. But in the old days, you would have had to had extra chips or extra circuitry, if you're not using solid state chips, to know which lights would light up for each digit or not. And certainly it would highlight a fact that for a lot of people, I imagine it doesn't make a lot of sense why in the beginnings of the 80s, a pinball table talking to you at random in an attract mode like this would be appealing, or something that would even catch anyone's attention. Nowadays, where we have like Siri and all kinds of things talking to you, or all kinds of distractions. Yeah, see, there's 2 flippers, so there is a decent chance that I will have to use the left bump and the right bump on this controller to try and get MagnaSave to work, and that means I very possibly will drop it and fail. On the Xbox 360, I don't think you use the bumps, though you just use the flippers. In all fairness, though, even the Xbox 360 version of Pinball Arcade, which was called something else, it was called like the Williams Collection because it was just Williams Table or something like that. It could have been the Gottlieb Collection also, or the Stern Collection. But those games only really had to program the interface and custom code the interface to run the dozen or so tables that were installed by default. Not there was no thought of adding new tables and adding new functionality on top of that. So, yeah, there almost certainly is a wizard score for getting multiples and extra balls. And a lot of things certainly to focus on as I'm jumping through all this text to just highlight things. Let's see, what else? Let's look at the flyer and then let's start playing. By the time we hit the 80s, Williams clearly is a big enough deal, or think they're a big enough deal, to have their title front and center, and then they have a tilted angle. Weird. I can't see any further part of that paper though, so it's seemingly cut off. Like I can't shift the screen any lower than that. So, looking on the back of this flyer, either they didn't want to spend a lot of ink, or they had hyped up Black Knight a lot more, because this is a very low effort flyer for a pinball table. Oh, is there anything else we can do? No, can't change the number of balls. Seems like you basically lost that in the game setup, and instead now have that in the Pro Operators menu. And for a few games, that means you just lost it completely. But also it means that for some people, a 5-ball game setup would have been acceptable for some tables to get the standard goals. So we want a 2-ball multi-ball, score a mystery score, increase the bonus multiplier to 5,000, score at least 25,000 on a spinner, and score at least 1,000,000 points. So let's see how well we can do that. You can also see that here we're starting to see 3 plays for $1 versus 2 plays for 75 cents versus 1 play for 50 cents. So it's cheaper to put in $1. And see, that is some weird sound effects. That is how definitely I was playing playing pinball when I would play pinball, is to to work really efficiently with the money. Of course, that is paying first and then deciding whether you like the game or not later. It is effectively close to a so there's a 2-ball multi-ball. And I assume the wizard goals will probably want a 3-ball multi-ball. I do think I have Magna Saver locked, and I'm not seeing it activate, so I think I probably would have to hit the other ball. Careful not to drain out immediately. We still don't have a ball saver feature. Ah, yeah, that's a little loop up at the top there. It's a very small loop, but it's an interesting way to make use of a small area on a table. That is definitely something I've been missing so far on playthroughs is yeah, a lot of text there and very slow to play. I definitely have been missing the idea of just being able to go into multi-ball and move and just keep the balls moving and have fun and have that random wild chaos that you eventually grow to expect from pinball tables. And they definitely have just not been a feature of the 70s tables. If anything, I suppose by the 80s we had gotten the Supreme Court decision or the court decision, I don't know if it really was a Supreme Court decision or not, that pinball wasn't gambling, and so at that point they probably felt a little bit more confident to have elements on the pinball tables that weren't completely skill-based, and I think multi-ball is probably a great example of something that is not really completely skill-based. It is nice that you can skip the audio. This is a table that has like a skill shot basically at the beginning, and you need to get that skill shot, otherwise that center lane will just drain out down the middle. This really is one of those kinds of tables that would benefit a lot from a slight tweak. If you could simply just install a peg to divert that center drain away from the center lane, that would be great. Really, I'm gonna have to try to use the ball magnet saver, but it's not even like I have the magnet saver enabled. The magnet saver is an interesting idea that is not refined, and it's much better to have the kickbacks. Although there's plenty of tables out there that do have the outlane ball return kickbacks, and they still don't enable them by default or actually accomplish what you would like to accomplish with it because of some requirement or another. So you can see how it's fairly easy to use the left flipper in the upper playfield to keep the ball up in the upper playfield, and that way you can use the left flipper in the upper playfield to try for other targets. It does kind of create a scenario where you're much better off having the ball in the upper playfield almost always, but that won't work for some of the goals because you kind of can't get the score multiplier unless you're in the lower playfield, and I think you kind of want to, for some of the goals, light up all of the you want to light up all the drop-down targets on both the top and the bottom of the field.
One enemy cannot fight. The Black Knight will play you.
We're still seeing a lot of instances here in which this table has opportunities to drain the ball. Either that or my beginner's luck just ran out after the first game. So one of the goals was to get like 25,000 points on the spinner. You probably would have a hassle trying to pull that off. You may also notice that there are yellow flippers for this table, where we've been mostly looking at like white flippers, and Williams, I think, had kind of iconic yellow flippers, which that's smart branding, certainly. Like you're gonna spend most of your time looking at the flippers, so big red rubber bands around yellow flippers is good branding. It's not a great color scheme, but
one enemy cannot fight the Black Knight again. The Black Knight will win again. Will you challenge the...
You could easily make just a little bit of tweaks here and improve the audio a lot, and this would feel like a fairly unique new pinball table. There's enough on this table to justify not adding much. You could say the center playfield is fairly empty, but that's fine. I don't think there would be anything I really would want to add. Now, if I lock a third ball in the top, I believe that will be a 3-ball upper playfield multi-ball.
Fight against the enemy.
And you can see there's a ton of light going on here. And the main thing is you want to kind of keep the balls in play, and if you can get them to the upper playfield and relock them, that would be like a special, I think, also. So that would be nice. Of course, when you're smashing the flippers, you put that left flipper right in front of that drain out, so there is a decent chance you're not going to manage to you're not going to manage to shoot the ball up the center lane. So you almost have like a toggle possibility that you might want to pull off. Gotta get the ball fairly smoothly down that line. Wow, the ball, I think, just popped above the flipper and glitched in the physics a little bit. There we go. So left bump to use the magnet saver, and then left trigger to release the magnet saver. And you can see that the magnet saver does have a limited amount of time, and it's not a strong enough magnet saver that it will pull the ball all the way across. Alright, so score at least 1,000,000 points and increase the bonus multiplier to 5. What our high scores so far have been. Not particularly high. I would say this is a table to favorite, but it's probably not in the top 10. It's very historically relevant, it's very playable, but at a certain point you're gonna find that the magnet saver is just a lot of extra work, and you're gonna find that if you're not getting really great at very specific shots on this table, you're not going to have a good time. Whereas later tables, there's kind of something to always do, to the point where later tables are kind of crazy, and the angles are still a little awkward.
One enemy cannot fight the knight again. Will you challenge?
What I would have changed is I would have had the center lane curve more towards the left. That way it shoots the ball against the wall on the left. Instead of, wow, we're just messing up terribly. Or you have the left and right ramps lead directly into the in lanes. You probably would use the metal wire tubes that we have yet to see a game even have any of those yet, but that would have worked fairly well. And the center drain could have had a metal wire tube to the left flipper, for instance, instead of being a ramp. Yeah, remove the center ramp completely and instead have it drain to the left in lane. See, if you just get into the groove, you kind of can hit the same shots over and over again on any pinball table, and probably won't give you a ton of score unless you've done some setup. But if you can guarantee no loss, that's good enough for most. There we go. So that should be a 3-ball lower playfield multi-ball. Not a huge difference between the two, really, but oh, there is a difference. It's a 2-ball multi-ball, even though I think I did have 2 balls locked in the upper playfield. See how the magnet saver totally just at that point wastes any momentum you would have had, for better or worse. Well, I got the score up to 5 times. Would that be enough to get to 1 million, though? No, not really. To get 1 million points, you're going to have to seek several multi-balls in one 3-ball game. 2 or 3, and get that tiny loop up higher. We aren't, I'm not 100% sure if there is a special for multi-ball, like where you would get a jackpot. Some of the multi-balls we've seen before really haven't had that concept where there was a goal after getting the multi-ball. It was just that there were multiple balls on the table and perhaps the score was slightly improved. This is also a table where having the ability to turn down the table sounds would be nice. Although it is weird that you don't have custom options of that for each table, because I could easily see a scenario where you may decide one table is louder than the other or more annoying than the other, and you might want to mute the sound effects on one table but not all of them and have that saved. I mean, in those kinds of settings or a tiny little database or text file configuration, it's not like it would take a lot of programming or space on a hard drive to have custom settings per table. And that's what I keep running into, is that as an actual game, as a program, it may be doing a fairly perfect job of simulating the real-world physics of a pinball game as best as it can do. But it really just drops the ball in any other element that you would expect to exist. Any little extras. It is a no-frills product sold at a premium price and also abandoned effectively at this point. And yet, because there is that niche fandom of pinball fans, and that fandom is being underserved, Pinball Arcade still might be the best option. It probably isn't at this point. If you were trying to get old tables, you probably still would get more old tables with Pinball FX3 at this point. This is another table that I kind of don't want to put down. Like the real trick. Yeah, let's finish this game and I'll show. I'll go into operator mode and show off some things. Let's go in here. What if we actually go into operator mode and we change this one, we have enter, up and down. Seems to me like there's going to be a bunch of flashing options that we can move up and down. So, yeah. Each one of these are very weird options. We basically would have to go into the operator's mode and figure out the help. How to use operators mode. Set it on. Select open coin door. There are 3 buttons in the coin door. Start, up, down, and advance. With the up down in the up position, press the advance button to display the test menu. This menu contains music, display, switch, and coil tests. A lot of those really don't need to be emulated. Scroll through the menu. Once you're in the menu, use up and down to change the scrolling direction. To change the menu, use the back button to back out from the Pro menu. And select open coin door again. Note, although most of the operator's menu will function just like the real table, some features, while being selectable, will not be functional. Most notably are printing and coin pricing settings. Yeah, I don't know why you would bother with that. Right, so there is no advance button, first of all. That's just straight up a lie. Up and down, up and down, up and down. Up and down. Up and down, up and down. Enter. Must be advance. Up and down. Yeah, I suppose this is probably just testing the LEDs. Start. I've got 2 sound effects. I have a 1AA, which probably is a light test. Nothing here, though, seemingly around changing the number of balls. Which, once again, that seems like that's just something you can't do. You cannot try to spend the win. So, ideally, what you want to do here, this ball's moving actually fairly quickly, fairly easily, a little too easily, getting bounced around. You want the ball to go through this and then get that shot perfectly. And then you want to go through that again to get your score times 3. And then even controlling the ball, you can see that this is like incredibly hard to pull off. And these are score multipliers at the end, so you can do that later. So then you want to be able to get that shot like 4 times. And if you don't hit the drop targets, all 3 of the drop targets, fast enough, then you will actually not be able to get a full light up. Which that is what you ideally would want to do. Is 3 times knock each of the drop targets down. Man, even potentially controlling the whole thing, though, you see how there's nothing. See, and that's where the ball launches from. That's why I didn't recognize it at all. It launches from that weird angle. Yeah, man, it is such a finger killer.
Fight again. The enemy.
And see, now that you're controlling all three balls, they're mostly going to press upward. I believe your extra special thing is to launch back up into that area. Yeah, it's giving you about 25,000 points each time you get the ball back up to that area. So that is your real focus. So now, like, all the blues are lit up. So now it would be a desire to hit the reds 3 times. And I really am just creating like the almost perfect scenario. And there is a sound effect you just wouldn't have heard normally. So there you can hear him say, "You win." And I'm over 1 million. Let's go Magna Lock on the left. And Magna Lock on the right. I'm at like 1.5 million at this point. And you can see just basically everything is lit up. With the exception of the blue and the red in the upper lane. So at this point, let's just play. And see how much more score you could get once you'd set the whole thing up and gotten that multiplier as high as you want. Not by much. You can see the 2 balls fairly quickly drained out. And see, now that we are out of multi-ball mode,
I cannot play you. You win.
I might be able to light up each of those. It's still like incredibly difficult using the D-pad. It does feel like you are just using a magnet. And so you get that like weird sound effect when you light up all 6 of the spear heads, I think is what they're supposed to represent.
Again, the enemy.
And see, once you start hitting more interesting tables, more modern tables, it makes a lot more sense to have ball control and want to set up a multi-ball and have all your score multiplier ready to go. So we were at like 2,400,000 before, and now as it's gonna add more, that added up to 2,672,000. And let's just go ahead and drain the other 2 balls, because this isn't going to really do anything for us. Except for maybe give us a high score that's illegitimate. Which I guess that does explain why they let you potentially reset your high scores.
One enemy cannot fight the black knight again. You win 1 fight. I challenge thee again. Will you challenge the black knight again?
Yeah, so we have an illegitimate high score there. That it asked me for my high scores, but then it didn't actually put it. Didn't actually put it in there. Let's check the high scores now. No, it didn't actually accept it, even though it asked my initials. Interesting. And the menu still is awkward, to say the least. See, you would think like game setup or help and options would change something here. As far as under the sound menu, you would think that you could have custom sound menus or custom camera settings or custom pretty much anything, and it's just not there. How many pages of instructions would this have been? If anything wants to load. 99 instructions. It's not even as complicated as some of the previous tables we have seen. But yeah, I definitely would say Black Knight deserves to be a favorite, but you also kind of know it would take me a little bit more time, probably an hour, maybe 2, maybe 3, to get to 1,000,000 points to get this standard goal. My top score is not probably anywhere close to anyone else's top score, and I guess I could check once again just overall top scores. If anything, we could see like weekly scores and just see how many people in total have even no, I don't want to add that, friend. Oops. Well, whatever. I didn't realize that was how that was going to work. Wanted to see what my score was. Like, I'm 33 on Black Knight this week. I guess it is Monday, but it does show that there is not a ton of people playing these pinball games. But yeah, we are still very much in a scenario where we're hitting iterative games, things that are historically relevant, less than things that are really top tier games that I'd want to play for hours and hours and hours. Honestly, I think by the time we hit like Pinbot, that'll be a decent table that I'd want to put a lot of time in. I can't really attest to a lot of these other tables, so there could be something between this and Pinbot. And if one was to guess, I bet Pinbot is somewhere around 85. And yeah, that'll be that. I still also kind of feel like there is tons of room, and they probably played their hand wrong by making packs of pinball tables that had 2 or 3 really good ones and then 2 mediocre or medium ones, when they probably should have sold 1 really good table and then added 2 or 3 very low quality ones on top of that, like 60 errors table that people wouldn't really think to buy. Or you could certainly have given a 60s, a 70s, an 80s, a 90s, and the 2000s as a pack. And that way, there would be like at least 1 good one in the pack, and you'd have several very different types of tables. Eventually, we will hit a point where I'll have favorited the ones I like to play, and then I would potentially, if I ever came back to play more of this, I would cycle just between those favorites. I am at like 274 achievements still to unlock, which pretty much highlights that it would be insane to try and get all the achievements. Like going back and trying to play Paragon or Genie or Wild Card really doesn't interest me. Some of these other tables are fine. I wouldn't mind going back and playing Centigrade 37, and maybe if I lowered my standards, I might even favorite that table. But I don't really feel like I would want to play a lot of these. I don't even remember like Fireball, which is crazy because I managed to make a fairly decent score on Fireball, and I've already forgotten it, being such an old table. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.